All right, well, I've cut out the amount of the fender that I think I need to in order to make this thing work. We'll see. So, because apparently the fender and bag combination that I got was designed for a softail, it really couldn't work with this hump, and I was not about to cut my fender. So I would rather cut the fiberglass than cut the metal. So what I'm going to do, I've got this thing all measured out for the cuts that you saw. I'm going to put it here. I'm going to create a mold with foam, both the hard foam like that and some of the spray foam. I'll form a mold and set the fender where I need it, and then I'll go through to do the fiberglass. Again, something I have zero experience with, so this is going to be a fun process to learn how to do that and see what kind of custom modifications I can do using different types of material. I've got tons of fiberglass mat, that whole roll there. There's a whole roll up there. I've got a bucket of strands, and then I've got my resin and stuff. So we'll see how it turns out. I'm gonna mask the whole thing off, so if I screw it up, then it doesn't mess up the bike itself. Got it framed out right now. What I'm gonna do is put some spray foam inside there just to create a mold to fill the space between the foam on the outside and the inner fender. Everything's taped off underneath so nothing gets down any lower. Again, just trying to make a mold because ultimately I have to use fiberglass for all of this stuff. All right, so first step done. I've got that filled with the foam. I'll let that set, cure, cut off the excess, take off the foam, remove the fender, and see what my mold looks like. And then, like I said, I will use that to start my fiberglass, because I will have to glass over all of this and create some sort of shape here to blend into the fender. So that works. That didn't turn out too bad. So I had that all masked off with the big pink stiff foam on the side, and I sprayed in a bunch of the great stuff. And it's not designed to fill voids, which is why it's not solid there. But what that did was create a mold for me to be able to use to lay my glass. So I'm going to spray a touch more in there because I moved the whole fender back some because I didn't have it lined up with the bag correctly. So I'm going to spray just a little bit into that just to get that filled again, because there's some give, and I don't want that give, even though I'm going to raise it up off of the fender with a spacer, a standoff. But this has now created the mold that I can go ahead and I'm going to put foil tape on here because that'll be a nice release agent all on its own. I don't have to put anything else on here. I'll pull the blue tape off. I don't know, I might even keep that on there and put the foil tape on top of there, just again so it doesn't mess up the stock fender underneath there. But then I'll go ahead and lay my glass and resin across this to create one solid piece that's going to go across. And I'm going to do something to kind of shape the front here. Not really sure yet how I'm going to do that to kind of make it blend into the fender. Most of this will not be seen because the bag will be there and the lid will be there, so you're not going to be able to really see it anyway, but I don't want it to just kind of stop there. I'd like to do something to make it look a little bit better. But that didn't turn out too bad for my mold. I got the bag lined up where I want it, coming far enough off the back wheel. I will go and put a brace going from behind the license plate there up to the bar that goes across from one side to the other on those D-chopper brackets to support that rear fender a bit more. But all in all, that wasn't awful. I was kind of nervous about doing it. Didn't really want to cut up the fender, but it was going to have to be done. And what I'll do is I'll put some threaded rod in the holes here, and there should be another one right about there. Just some threaded rod, wrap it in some tape or something like that when I lay the fiberglass. That way I can actually take screws down through there to attach the fender, the extended fender to the stock fender. And I'll put my standoffs in there to raise it up just a hair. But I'll probably cut this foam down just a touch more because having it in there is actually a really good support for the fender, and it'll probably keep it from waggling with the bottom of the fender because it'll be supported individually on the sides. So my first attempt at doing something like this, if you have any feedback on what I can do to do this better before I dive into it full steam, I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Letting my last bit of foam set so I can make sure that I have the flex in this space gone, so it'll be a nice solid fit. Underneath this painter's tape, I already have the foil tape all the way back, and so that'll function as its own release agent to get the fiberglass off once I lay it on. I'm doing an edge here. This I'm going to have it come up and taper to meet the fender, because I think it'll look a little bit neater than just stopping right there. I'll finish it up, or I'll change it up a little bit, and then once the fiberglass is there, I can always shave it and mold it if I want to change the shape of it a bit. So that's where I'm just waiting on this to cure, pull all the painter's tape off of this, and I've already got all my fiberglass mat laid out. Here's my my loose strand stuff, and here's my my final layer, which is nice and thick. That's got to be 3 mil. So I'll probably put 2 layers of this and then a final layer of this, and I've got my resin over here somewhere. But I'm gonna jump on this, if not today, on Wednesday, because tomorrow's my heavy meeting day, so I probably won't even get out in the garage tomorrow, Tuesday. All right, moment of truth. So I've got everything masked off except what I'm going to try to glass. So I'm going to try to cover all of that to create one whole new front edge of this fender, all glassed over. Obviously, where there's foil tape is not where I'm trying to glass, and I want that to be the part that's going to pull off. Got my resin and my hardener and stuff over here. Ooh-wee, getting ready to give it a shot. Like I said, a little nervous about it. I haven't practiced on anything else. I probably should have practiced on something before jumping onto this. But worst case scenario, sand it down. All right, let's get busy. All right, I got 3 or maybe even 4 layers of the fiber. And now I gotta put, I'm gonna wait till tomorrow, and then I'll put this stuff on there, the real thick stuff. Try to smooth that out a little bit. It wasn't terribly scary. Between a couple of the layers, I hadn't put a lot of the resin together, and I think I may have put a couple of drops too many of the hardener in there, and so the resin tried to go off on me while I was finishing up. But again, not too bad, not terribly scary. It appears to be getting the shape that I want to get out of it. I'm going to try to raise that up a bit so that it's not as significant a drop down, but actually I don't mind the design effect that would actually have in the fender, because there's already a line that runs down both edges of the fender. So I'll see how that works out. It's going to stop when I cut it, like right about there or so. And of course I put the bolts in there, and there's foil tape all around there, so I can keep my holes for securing it. And there actually is another hole right there, but I think what I'm gonna have to do is once I have the whole thing together and locked on by the front bolts, I'm gonna have to pull the wheel and go up from the bottom and drill out, because there's no way I'm gonna be able to line up a hole, I think, effectively and still make it work the way I want it to work. So I'm gonna leave this for 24 hours, come back tomorrow, and do the second set. Probably, like I said, I was thinking maybe 2 layers of this, but this is like 1.5 mil, 2 mils thick. And it's a very tight weave, so I may only need one of those. So we shall see tomorrow. But not bad. Not bad at all for a first attempt. So the first coat of, or the first 3 layers of fiber are on there. I put 3, maybe 4 layers, depends on where. Back here was definitely more, since that's going to be the part where it's going to meld into the other part of the fender. And very interesting. This is where I had cut it, and it kind of creates that divot there like I showed you in the last clip. It's kind of a nice design element, but I think when I put the thicker cloth on there, I might build that up just so it's not so much of a dip. But when I go to sand it down for the finish, we'll see if it creates some kind of shape that's cool. I don't know. So what I'm going to do today, since that's cured now for 18 hours or so, today I'm going to put the thicker, tighter weave stuff on top to create yet another harder. Man, it's pretty solid. And like I said, never worked with fiberglass before, so this is pretty cool. The 3M you're seeing down there, as you saw before, is just the foil tape that I have on the fender, which should act as its own release agent since the resin shouldn't stick to that. So I will take some sandpaper or sanding pads. Actually, this is ultra fine, so I won't be using this. I need some 80 grit sandpaper, which I have in here. Sand that down, rough the surface up, create another batch of my resin. So I'm using this 4 ounces of resin to 40 drops of hardener, mixing it up, using my chip brushes here to, I'll brush on a coat of the resin. So there's something for the fiberglass mat to stick to. Stick that down, and then with resin, go with the chip brush and saturate the fiberglass all the way around, set it in, and then hopefully once that cures, it will be all good. So you'll notice what I did here is that that pink Corning's, I think they call that craft styrofoam or craft insulation or something. I cut that into a shape that I wanted to kind of create a front edge to the fender. So I cut that, shaped it, did the same thing on the other side. I had to put a piece back here to space it to give me proper shape and distance off the bag. This is going to have to be, because I can see this front corner on this side is a little farther forward. So when I go to sand it down and clean it up, I'll clean that up a bit. And I don't know how much of this I'm actually going to keep or how much I'm going to actually cut off with the Dremel and a cutoff wheel. And then I wrapped those whole blocks of foam in the foil tape and then attached them to the foam that's underneath the fender right now, which is holding it in place. And of course I ran foil tape around these bolts, ran them up through, so those holes would be already there. I should be able to just unscrew those and take the whole thing off. We'll see when it comes time to release it. But now I'm going to go ahead and work on the next couple of layers, which will be that thicker weave. I think I'm gonna have to cut some more because I have a small strip here and that big strip, which is more than enough to cover it. And this thing is super thick. But I don't know if I'm gonna do 2 layers or 1. I'll probably need a whole batch of my resin just for this and that one. And if so, then I probably will have time to go ahead and cut another piece and mix up some resin before I put another layer on it. But like I said, I have 2 or 3 layers of the thinner mat, and this is a very thick mat with a very tight weave on the outside. So I don't know. I'll see if it's going to be 1 or 2 layers. I may even put 1 more layer of the chopped mat on there first, like down here, just to thicken this up a bit before putting the layer of the thick stuff on. All right, see you on the flip side. Okay, hey. Hopefully you guys can hear me clearly with the respirator on. Just finished laying out my last bit of fiberglass on the seat, and the resin just started to go off. Thankfully, I had pretty much put the last bit on there that I wanted to. So as you guys saw in the previous clip, I did 3 or 4 layers of the stranded glass mat yesterday, and let that cure overnight, and it was nice and hard. And this morning I went ahead and put another layer of the stranded mat on before putting the thicker layer of the tighter weave on, and I put 2 layers of that. So here's what I'm looking at now. Looks pretty good. Everything's really well saturated. It's still wet, so I'll let this cure overnight. and we'll see what it looks like in the morning. I did leave that dip there. I filled it in ever so slightly, but like I said, I'm going to take a look once I sand it down. Obviously, this lip here will come down a bit when I sand it, but I want to see if it leaves kind of a nice design element to it. I used my chip brush and kept dabbing in there, so hopefully I got most of the bubbles out and won't have to do a lot for sanding and whatnot tomorrow. So that's what I was procrastinating about, because again, I had never done fiberglass work before and had no idea what I was doing, how I was going to do it. It's still really fumey in here, and I don't want to open my garage door because it's windy outside, and I don't want a whole bunch of dust and contaminants to fly into the fiberglass while the resin is still wet. So I will let this cure, and I will come back tomorrow and see what it looks like. Oh man, oh man. See you then. Good morning. It is Sunday. It is Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to any mothers watching, and to anyone who is watching, happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers in your life. Mom, sister, your own wife, or even daughters. So happy Mother's Day. You guys haven't seen a lot of me. I've been kind of holding the camera, shooting down at stuff. So, hey, I'm still around. Actually, shaved a couple of days ago so I don't look completely crazy on my video this morning. As you've seen from the clips, if you're watching this video, I've been putting them together. I went ahead and got into what was making me the most nervous about this build, which was doing the fiberglass on this fender. And didn't come out too bad for our first time. I didn't practice on anything else beforehand, which probably would have been a smart thing to do. But I figured, hey, if I'm going to do it, I'm just going to jump right into it. So 2 days ago, I laid down 3 layers of fiber with all the resin, let that cure overnight. And then yesterday I came out, I put 1 more layer of fiber and 2 layers of the heavy thick weave, which I showed you guys in the clips preceding this one. So it's cured overnight. It's nice and solid. Definitely needs to be sanded. It is far from smooth, and as you can see, I'm sticking myself with fibers that are sticking up through the resin. So I'm going to attempt to pull this off. I covered the stock fender with foil tape, which the resin and fiberglass should not stick to. So hopefully that's going to pull straight up. So hopefully I can just take the 2 bolts out of here, and I'm sure it's going to stick a little bit, but hopefully I can get it all up in one piece. I'm recording this with my phone, and so it only has so much memory. So I will attempt to video pulling that up, but I'm not sure if it'll all take because I haven't dumped the memory of my phone for a while. So I'm going to stop recording for a moment, take the plastic off, take the masking tape off around here from where I masked it for the job, and then I will start recording again and attempt to pull it off. Bloopers stay in, so hopefully it works and I don't break what I just made. So stand by, coming right back at you. All right, so decided to put some gloves on for this part. As you can see, I've gotten the masking tape and the plastic off of here, got the bolts out. All this will have to be cut off and filed down from where the bolts were going through there, and I glassed all around it. With any luck, this will all come off as one piece and not break anything, and I won't break my original fender and end up having to buy another fender. So let's give it a shot, see if she separates. See if it separates okay. And she did. And now I have this foam is what I was using to space it out. That was just the spray-in foam that expands. So that got me my fitment against the fender. Here I had pieces of the craft insulation like that, which I formed and placed in foil and taped on so I could have a nose, because I don't know if you can see, the black part here is where the fender had ended. And at first this was a fender that came all the way up and across, and it had a lip that went up, and it just wouldn't fit on the bike. So I had to cut, everywhere you can see the black is where I had to cut the fender out in order to make it actually overlay the stock fender. So now I've got a fender that will go ahead and mold to the shape of the OEM fender. Since I'm keeping the OEM fender on there as a support, I've got my holes for my mounting bolts. There's actually another hole that I'm going to have to drill right about there. I think what I'm going to do is take the back wheel off and go from underneath, so I make sure that the hole is in the correct place instead of playing with it on here. But for my first try at doing fiberglass, I mean, that is solid. She ain't going nowhere, that's for sure. And I'm going to cut out some of that foam. Some of it will remain as a support because this doesn't lay flat. It actually sits up like that somewhat. So instead of sitting like this, it actually sits like this for the distance out to the back that the fender goes. So I am going to take a marker and I'm going to draw a line about where I'm going to trim off this excess and trim that off. Take out the pieces in here, and here that I put in order to give this front end some shape, because they don't need to stay. And hit it with some 80 grit, sand it down, make sure I've got it pretty much where I want it to be. I'm going to probably have to take some body filler and smooth it out because it is not completely smooth. It's got some bumps and lumps in there. I'll have to take this edge down a bit because I don't know if you can see it on the video, but there's definitely a rise there from where it goes over. So I will take that down a little bit, kind of float the body filler out a couple of inches to try to give that a smooth transition. And there's definitely a dip here. Excuse me, you can probably see that in the video. And it gives it kind of a design aspect, but I'm not sure how I feel about it right now. Once I put the body filler on there and smooth this out and throw some primer on it, I'll see how I like the look and see if it's a design element I want to keep in. And I can actually work with it and do other things with it on the top of the fender here to kind of blend it in and make it not so bad. The seat will actually come back to about here, I think. So I just don't want it to look odd. But for my first attempt at making or working with fiberglass, not too bad. A lot of this is going to be cut off. Hopefully it'll look good when I'm done. So next time you see me, I'll have drawn some lines on there and gotten it to where I want to cut it out. And we'll go from there. Oh man, looking good, I think. I think anyway. All right, so I'm outside. I've got the fender off and just kind of sitting out here. What I'm going to do is take some 80 grit to it and knock down some of the rough edges on there that makes it hard to touch, just to smooth it out a little bit. And then, like I said, I'll draw a line of where I'm going to cut off the excess and create the actual shape of the fender. Then I'll put some body filler on there, some Bondo to smooth out the surface, to make it as nice and smooth as I can, because right now it's really rough from just using the chip brush and dabbing down on the fiberglass to break the bubbles and such, so it's not smooth. And even though I put a really thick coat of resin on the top, it didn't just kind of flow out and smooth out like like a lacquer or anything like that. So that's where I am now. Like I said, I'm going to take my handy dandy air orbital sander here with some 80 grit. I might even go as high as 120 to smooth it out a little bit before putting the body filler on there. So I'm going to mask up and throw some air to this thing and go from there. All right, so I've hit it a couple of times with the 80 grit on the orbital sander just to take it down a little bit to get it easier to handle, because there's a lot of rough edges that were catching my fingers. And then what I did is I took some acetone to wipe it down with a paper towel, and not only did that clean it off, but every place the paper towel got stuck and got a piece caught, it let me know that there was a piece of fiberglass sticking up there that I needed to work on. I haven't gotten to cut this off or anything yet, so what I'm going to do now, as you can see, I've marked pretty much where I'm going to cut off the excess fiberglass, which should be the rough shape of the front of the fender. Because as you remember, the black part here was the front of the fender, and all of this is gone. So what I want to do is bring this forward so it comes toward the seat a bit and actually looks a bit more complete. So I've marked it a little bigger than what I need because it's easier to take off a little bit more than it is to go back and add if I took off too much. So I'm going to go ahead and get my Dremel cutoff tool now and go from there. So here I've taken all of the tape off of the OEM fender. You know, I had blue painter's tape on there, then had the foil tape on top of that. And the foil tape served as a release for the fiberglass. And I came over here with my Dremel with cutoff wheel and put a basic shape to the front of the fender that I think I'm gonna like. And now I'm going to go ahead and test fit the fender onto the bike. I will stop and then bring it, come back on when the fender is on, just so I'm not trying to do all this with one hand. All right, so I've got the fender over here to go ahead and give it a test fit. You notice I still got this foam on the sides here that I used in order to hold it in place while I was trying to get the correct dimensions. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that yet. Hopefully these bolts will fit. I just picked up a couple of bolts off my table. I want to make sure they have the good length, and they seem to be. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with that foam just yet. It's not very attractive, so I definitely have to do something with it. And if I ever decide to enter this thing in a show, having that foam there will not be a good look. So I have to figure out what I want to do with that. But now that I've got this thing lined up sitting on here, I've got 2 bolts here. I'm going to put another one here. There's actually a third here that I forgot about. And when I set up the bolts in the fender to lay the fiberglass, I could have put that there, and that would have actually been good. But I will do something for the sides to keep the height and help support it. I just don't know what that's going to be just yet. But that came out pretty nice. As you can see here, I've got a lip on the front that I created because the way the fender was originally going to end, it would have been all the way back here, just coming across, and all this would have just been open, which, you know, on a Harley, maybe there's something else that goes there that would have looked all right. So I just kind of shaped and fashioned this front piece, and, you know, the bag is going to end here. So you won't really see this, but I think as far as the aesthetics of, you know, how narrow the seat's going to come up and back like so, that this would look better. So, you know, I'm going to work with that a little bit, work with the shape, get myself a final shape that I want. And then I'll go ahead and put the body filler on there to kind of smooth all that out a little bit. But that's pretty good. I'm going to have to support it underneath because, as you can see, there's a gap between the fender, the OEM fender, and this fender. So what I'm going to do is run a bracket from down there behind where the license plate is going to be, and it's going to come to the back of the D-chopper's bracket here and support the back of that. But that will work with a little bit more after I get the top and the sides done. So, been a productive morning so far, and we'll see what else I can get done today. All right, so test fit with the bags. Gonna have to do a little bit of tweaking. It sits a little bit cocked to the right, so I'm gonna have to tweak a couple of things with the foam underneath that's supporting, and also the bracket that's gonna go from behind the license plate to the bottom of the D-chopper bracket. I can use that to help get it straight, because it's just a little, you can see that piece of foam right there. I've just got in there to kind of keep it aligned. The gap is fairly sizable right now, but there's going to be LED brake light strips in there, and you see the gap at the top on that side slightly wider than the gap at the top on that side. So I'll be able to tweak that with spacers there, or even possibly bend the outside of the top rail of the D-chopper bracket right there, maybe bend that out just slightly, and that will accommodate that. The gaps at the top of the bags are pretty similar. You know, a slight difference here and there, but not bad. So that's just minor tweaks that I'll be able to do and get that lined up straight. I need to pull that up just a hair, and it looks like the bags are pretty even. Maybe the left bag needs to come back about 1/4 of an inch. The right bag needs to come back about 1/4 to 1/2 an inch as well to line up with the edge of the fender right there and right there. So I'll work it out, but that looks pretty good with the fender like that. So I'm going to go ahead and put the body filler on there and clean that up, and I think I'm going to be good to go. Sorry, that's zooming in the wrong direction there. I apologize. Woo woo. Nice. All right, so I'm very happy with the progress I'm making on the fender. I do like the way the shape came out. Those are my mounting holes there. I do like the way I finished the front end here. You can see I extended it here about 4 inches and gave it a design element that makes it flow down into the fender a little bit better, the OEM fender and behind the seat better. And I sanded it down. You know, I'm still not sure how I feel about this indentation going across here, which is where the cut was, and the way it flows in the fender. It doesn't look bad, and this crease in the fender here kind of flows up and follows. So it's not horrible, but I'm still not sure. So now I'm getting ready to take some body filler and go over this so I can smooth it and shape it. Boy, I haven't worked with Bondo in 20 years. And even then it was on metal fenders with creases and dings and whatnot in them. So this is gonna be fun. I gotta remember how to work with this stuff. But yep, that's where I am, getting ready to jump on putting the body filler on there and smoothing that out. Oh man, here we go. All right, so I've got a few coats of body filler on there. I let it cure overnight. As you can see, there's still a few waves in there, and I need to build this section up just a hair to match a little bit better with that one. But like I said, let it cure overnight and put a little bit more filler on here in just a little bit, and work with the blocks and keep block sanding. Try to get that sucker down to the shape that I want. Obviously you see it comes up and over, and then the shape changes up here because of all that was cut away and then molding to the OEM fender. I guess I could have had this go straight over to the edge, but I mean the seat's going to cover that, and the seat's going to come back to about here into a point like so. So I kind of wanted it to be round and then flat on the sides. So like I said, I've gotten a lot of this smoothed out. So I'm going to put a little bit more filler on there. Here, here, a little up here. This I can probably take down and hit with glaze and putty and fill it. But I'm going to need to do a little bit more at the front corners to fill those a little bit better. I mean, this hasn't even been block sanded yet. It'll be closer to that, but needs a little bit more filler, a little more work. Just trying to take my time with it. Like I said, I haven't worked with Bondo in 20 years, so this is a re-education. It looks worse than it is from this angle because of the shadow on this side. But the whole thing actually came out pretty decent. We'll see what the finished product looks like. Okay, so I've gotten the majority of my filler work done. I have gotten, I got like 2 or 3 coats of filler on there, let it cure overnight. Did another 2 or 3 coats today. I sanded it with 60, 80, and then fine to get it pretty close. I've got the shape that I want. I've got it pretty smooth. So now what I've got to do is give it a mist of primer so I can find my high spots, you know, mist it with black and hit it with the sandpaper, find the high spots and work with it. I know I'm going to have some glaze and some putty because I will have a few pinholes in here. Definitely not perfect. Again, haven't worked with this stuff in 20 years, and it's a whole new chapter in life for me doing this fiberglass and stuff together. So here's what it looks like currently, and looks almost like it's got a nice wood grain to it, doesn't it? So you can see right here, even though it's super smooth, I think I'm gonna have to go through and fill that with some putty or something, because I can see it even though I can almost barely feel it. But you know, you have any imperfections in this, they will become highly evident once you throw paint on it. So I just hit it with a wet sand sponge, fine, not even extra fine, to get it pretty close. So I'm gonna set the camera down, I'm gonna mist it, and look for my high spots. And I'll actually record that. Okay, so I've blown this thing off with compressed air, and I hit it with acetone to get any dirt or anything else off there. I mean, I'm outside, so who knows what kind of debris is just in the air. There's probably pollen and everything else out here. But I've wiped it off with acetone to get the surface as clean as I can. And I'm just gonna hit it with this Rust-Oleum black sandable primer. And this first one is just gonna be, like I said, a light mist to go through, and then hit it with sandpaper to find out where the high spots are. I guess I'm gonna let it sit for just a minute or two before I start to sand it. So I won't record during that minute or so, but just wanted to give you an idea of what I was about to do. And that's pretty much all it needs, just enough to have a mist. And then once I start to sand it, any place where it sands clean but the paint is still there means that's a high spot, because the sandpaper was actually able to get to that versus what was below it. And so we want to get it down as even as possible. So I'm going to let this sit for a minute and dry, and then I'll get to sanding. All right, so you saw me dust it with paint, and then very lightly I went over it with a fine grit sanding block, and you can see all the black there. That's all my low spots, and so everything else was a higher spot, which is cool because this is actually in the shape. I can feel some rough areas here. This needs to come down so it can be a smooth transition from the original fender to this. So right there and right there I need to come down, but it's actually really smooth. It feels really nice. I gotta work with the front corners up here. This was all, I created all of this, so none of this existed before. So working with these shapes to get them close to even has been a bit of a challenge. But yeah, I think I'm gonna give this a touch more work with the fine sandpaper. Might have to take some 120 or 80 or 120 here and here just to smooth that out. But then I'm just gonna do fine on the rest of that, and then I'm going to primer it and put it on the bike and see how it looks. All right. I gotta say, I am actually quite pleased with the final product here. I've got a couple of coats of primer on there. It's so it's obviously dull. It is not perfect, but I did not expect it to be perfect. I actually did not expect it to come out as well as it did. So if you remember from the early parts of the clip, from here back is the original fender, and then I had to cut all but like to here on the sides. All of this was completely cut out in order to make this fit on my OEM fender. So all of that center part and all of this up front I made with fiberglass and foam. And this whole front corner, which is going to go down and come down behind the seat alongside the fender, I shaped that out of that craft foam and made that shape. It came out very even on both sides. It's not perfect. You see little pinholes and stuff, and I don't know if I'm going to get glaze and putty and try to fix that myself, or if I'm just going to leave that for when I get it painted, let them do some final surface prep before paint. But I'm very happy with the way that came out. Very proud of myself. I will pat myself on the back. Yay me. Yeah, a couple of little spots where, once the primer's on there, you can see where it's going to come out, but just a little bit of surface prep and that will be ready to go. I can't express how pleased I am with myself on this. So Coolio, I need to just go from underneath and drill my holes back out for where it's going to mount to the fender. What I'll do is I'll go with a small bit first just to center the holes, and then come from the top with the bigger bit. That way any flaking or whatever goes down instead of up. Don't need to mess up the surface anymore, even though I'm going to have not grommets, but they'll be the rubber kind of concave washers that go underneath the screws at the top. But that's the final product on the fender. I'm gonna go ahead and drill out the holes, put it on the bike, see how it looks. Sweet. So here's the fender mounted on the bike. So you can see this is the whole part I created so that it would drop down somewhere close to the bag, and not just leave that big huge open gap. Brought it all the way up to the front. The seat will sit on here and go back to about there. I have a stencil that I made up to get that front hole, so I'm going to put a third bolt there to lock it in. There's one that can go here. I'm not really sure. I was going to go ahead and drill from underneath through the bag, but because this actually sits about, about 2 inches above the fender, I'm not sure if I'm going to do that now. But what I am going to do is I'm going to put a piece of aluminum or bar steel that's going to mount flat against the back of this, go back to the crossbar for the D-chopper brackets to give that some support to the outside, so that those bolts up top are not the only thing holding the fender in place and stable. But yeah, came out pretty nice. I need to go downstairs and get my my lids and sit them on there to see how the whole thing looks. I actually think I will do that. I'll be back. All right, so I decided I'd go down and get my bag lids and put them on there to see what it was going to look like. I was assembling them, but I'm gonna have to take them apart anyway to put the speakers in. But I wanted to get a better look at how it would look with the lids on. I still have to do some tweaking of the bags to get them where I want them at the bottom, but I'm gonna leave a gap because I'm gonna put the Radiance LED tail lights on there that will run the length. I think I'm getting the 20 or 24 inch ones, something like that. But that came out pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, man, I like it. And just for funsies, I thought I'd temporarily mount the seat to see what it's gonna look like with the seat on it. I mean, that came out just the way I wanted it, up there below the seat to end that fender instead of it just being an abrupt stop. Now for the seat, I'm gonna have to put a hole right there with a grommet for that seat to rest in the fender. But boy, oh boy, I am so tickled. I am so happy with how this came out. Really, really happy with how that came out.